This week, we delve into the tragic story of Jonestown, the infamous cult led by Jim Jones that culminated in a mass murder in 1978. What began as a vision of a utopian society in the jungles of Guyana ended in the horrific deaths of over 900 men, women, and children. We will explore the rise of the People's Temple, the charismatic yet manipulative leadership of Jim Jones, and the devastating events that led to one of the largest loss of American civilian lives in a single incident before 9/11. Join us as we uncover the chilling details and lasting impact of the Jonestown tragedy.
I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole,
and we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Welcome back to Spooky Sleuths. Today we are going to talk all about Jonestown.
So excited. I love this
Me too.
topic.
This is one of my favorite cults, which while Sammy was diving into our research, she noticed that not a lot happened in actual Jonestown. It's the buildup. It's all of the background work that Jim Jones did.
Don't get us wrong. Over 900 people died.
Oh, yeah. No.
But outside of that event, I mean, things were bad. They weren't great, but they weren't there long enough to have this big, long story.
Yeah, like once they became a culty compound, it didn't last long. It was all of the recruiting before that that was just insane. So let's get started with the man himself, Jim Jones. Jim was born on May 13th, 1931 in Crete, Indiana. He was born to James Thurman Jones and Lynetta Jones. James was a disabled World War I veteran, and Lynetta had various jobs. Lynetta's work meant that Jim was left alone a lot, and his father really had no interest in him.
That's sad.
It is, but that kind of tracks for that time period.
Right.
He was a bright boy and a good student who excelled in public speaking.
You don't say.
Naturally. He had few friends, though, as he was seen as kind of weird. He didn't like sports or dancing or drinking. See, Jim was religious from a young age, as his neighbor would take him to church with her. Around age 10, Jim attended services at various churches in his town and became friends with a Pentecostal minister, which kind of goes with what Jim grew to be. Soon after his religious journey began, Jim started preaching to children in his town. In addition to preaching, he would hold church services in his home, including funerals. These funerals were for dead animals.
Oh.
This sparked questions from community members on where he kept finding dead animals, some suspecting that he killed them himself so he could have these funerals.
Honestly, I probably wouldn't be friends with him either if he was holding fake funerals for dead animals, like, all the time. You know, like, it's kind of cute when a little kid, like, if their goldfish dies and they have, like, a little service around the toilet before they flush it down.
But not, okay, it's time for our weekly funeral?
Yeah.
That's a little strange.
I found this, like, deceased animal on the side of the road.
Right, and Jim would hold these services in his home, but he was also the preacher that, like, you run into on the street that's sitting up on his soapbox preaching to people.
Yeah.
That was Jim as a child and young man. Like, I'm not saying you have to be friends with everyone, but that just gives all the vibes.
Yeah.
Jim's parents would go on to divorce, and Jim moved to Richmond, Indiana with his mother. In Richmond, Jim began working as an orderly in a hospital and focused on graduating high school, which he did in early December of 1948. While working at the hospital, he met his future wife, Marceline Baldwin. Marceline was a nursing student working at the hospital.
Oh, so she was like a cougar.
That's the vibe I get, because he hasn't graduated high school yet.
Yeah.
And she's a nursing student. Granted, she could have been like a newer nursing student doing her clinicals, but a little bit. After Jim graduated, he began attending Indiana University studying secondary education. In June of 1949, Jim and Marceline got married, and in 1951, they moved to Indianapolis, where Jim transferred to Butler University to take night classes and get his degree in 1961.
I'm sorry, but he should not be a teacher.
No, but public speaking,
To children.
secondary education, though.
I know, but that's like the more impressionable.
Yeah, that's true.
The secondary college or...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're more impressionable. These 18-year-olds, they don't know anything. They don't know any better.
Which I'm sure he used all that knowledge in creating his horrific cult. During this time, while he was finishing school, Jim decided to serve as a student pastor at a Methodist church. It didn't seem like Jim really had any true affiliation to any church. Like, you know, Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal, he didn't have any, like, true pull to any of them.
Yeah, and I mean, when he was young, he just went around town to all the different churches. It
Yeah,
seemed like he wanted to absorb everything that every church had, every religion had.
Right. Like, or it was either he was trying to figure out each of them and see what aligned with him,
Right.
or just to build his knowledge.
Which I understand that. Like, I used to read a lot about, like, Buddhism.
Buddhism
Buddhism.
again?
Buddhism and, you know, different types of religions, you know, Catholicism and Christianity too.
To see if anything aligned.
Yeah, or just to be more aware. I kind of knew when I was reading all of those in my teen years that I probably wouldn't align with anything, but to educate myself and to be aware of what is out there, what they believe.
Absolutely. So you can be...
So I get that.
So you can be more woke.
I am the wokest.
I'm aware.
Wide awoke. I'm wide awoke.
What?
Like the Katy Perry song,
Yeah.
Wide Awake?
Yeah, I got it. I got that.
Wide awoke. Anyway. Back to your story.
Yep, this didn't last long, as he did not agree with the leadership's views on segregation, which I will say that I wholeheartedly think what he was trying to do was commendable in regards to segregation.
Right.
I'm not condoning anything else he has done, but that I can get behind. Jim wanted to integrate the church, but this was in the Midwest in the 1950s, so that idea...
That's not happening.
Yeah, that idea didn't go over well. Not only did he want to integrate, but he wanted to raise funds for the church by importing monkeys and selling them as pets. Jim wanted to go door to door and sell these monkeys for $29.
I would have bought one.
Yeah, same.
It would have been really bad. I should not own a monkey, but I would have bought one.
I'm still unsure if you should own your puppy.
I probably shouldn't.
Since he was no longer at the Methodist church, he began preaching on his own, but he targeted African Americans. He used his monkey selling ideas with his own congregation. Jim would award his congregation with monkeys if they brought in the most members.
I mean, listen, I would come to the church for a monkey.
According to Jim, this initiative brought in 300 members.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Jim knew how to grow his group. No matter what the group was, he knew how to bring the people in.
You could get me anywhere for a cup of ice cream, let alone a monkey.
That tracks. This only lasted until 1954 when the monkey started coming in dead.
Oh, well.
He left 7 in customs in the federal building because he didn't want to pay the $89 air freight bill that was assessed for them.
Oh. Well, that seems kind of cheap of him.
A few were alive, but some were dead. And then he just left them all. Which is kind of strange.
Awful.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. If they were all dead, I would almost understand.
That's awful. Those poor federal building people. Those customs agents.
They're trying to give out... Well, it's not them giving out the dead monkeys, I guess.
When I think of dead monkeys, I think of Ebola. So if they were Ebola monkeys, I would have left them.
They could have been Ebola monkeys.
They weren't Ebola monkeys. They could have been.
We're making this very problematic. In 1955, Jim used an old church building that was used by the Mormons to open his first People's Temple.
All right.
This is where his congregation would gather for their services. This is where Jim began his healings.
Of course he did. Side note, People's Temple just makes me think of, like, the People's Court on TV.
I was thinking the People's Bank.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of money on Prime Day, okay? He would do these in large groups at a time, such as one service where he healed and converted 51 people.
That's a lot of people to be healing in one day.
Right? He's impressive. He promoted these healings as a way to draw people into his church. Again, he could get the numbers. Jim was very arrogant and began guaranteeing miracles and would publish advertisements claiming 1,000 definite testimonies of healing miracles in this city. He claimed to heal any and every illness and disorder. He's wild.
How do people believe that, though? I don't understand. Not even because of my medical background. I know that he's not going to heal my cancer by touching me.
I also know people that swear they have watched somebody regrow a limb, saw somebody's eyesight be given back to them.
You know, I saw somebody regrow a limb once. It was on The Boys on Amazon Prime.
Is that a good show?
It is a good show.
Do we like it?
It is a good show. But it's a TV show about superheroes. So these people, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I just know there are some people that truly believe that healings can happen. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with the Pentecostal belief.
Yeah. And, you know, I do think that your mental state has a lot to do with your healing. I think if you're trying, you're putting your best foot forward, and if this makes you feel like you are healed, you are all better, and that helps your prognosis, that's great. But I do think your mindset has something to do with it, and if that's affecting their mindset, then wonderful.
Right. I just have a hard time believing that somebody who has worn glasses or contacts for years starts crying in a church service, takes off their glasses, and then no longer needs them anymore because they have been healed to perfect vision.
Right.
Which is the story I was told whenever somebody was trying to get me to go to this church.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Jim was very arrogant and began guaranteeing miracles and would publish advertisements claiming 1,000 definite testimonies of healing miracles in the city. He claimed to heal any and every illness and disorder.
It's just so unbelievable.
It is. Like, I'm sorry, you're not going to heal blindness. You're not going to heal cancer, which is one of the things that
heart disease, vision issues.
Helping somebody be mobile again. Like, that's not going to happen, buddy. All I can think of is there's a South Park episode where Cartman essentially becomes Jim Jones. And he's like, you will be saved, and slaps Timmy in the face, which is the poor little boy that is in a wheelchair. Oh. And then he stands up and falls. See, he was healed. He stood on. It was awful.
Which I wonder if he had people that were so loyal to him that just faked it.
Oh, just wait. The People's Temple began in Indianapolis and was one of very few integrated churches in the area. Jim preached a utopian view of society, and his followers hung on every word.
Of course they did.
Jim was very charismatic and was well respected by his congregation. His followers were expected to be loyal to him and sacrifice their own needs for the greater good, aka the church.
Of course.
Jim did have a socialistic view on things and believed that there was an unhealthy economic balance in the country where the rich had too much and the poor had too little, even if they worked harder than the rich. Which
I get.
Yeah.
I get the first part where there is an economic unbalance, because there is still today.
Absolutely.
It's just crazy that thought was around there back in the 50s.
Right. And I'm sure to other people back in the 50s that was like, no, there's not.
Right.
Because people are like that today even, whenever there is a gross unbalance.
Right.
But Jim did open up things to help the poor, including soup kitchens, clothing closets, and homes for the elderly and mentally ill.
Well, that is good.
The church kept growing and growing, and so did Jim's family. Jim and Marceline had a child together in 1959, Stephen Gandhi Jones.
Of course his middle name is Gandhi.
Of course it is. While Stephen was their only biological child, the couple adopted 8 more children. The adopted children were from all different races, earning them the name the Rainbow Family. Jim and Marceline were actually the first white couple to adopt a black child in Indianapolis in 1961.
That's interesting.
It is, and also feels calculated.
Yeah.
Like, for Jim to be able to continue to push his agenda.
His integrated church,
Yep.
targeting African Americans.
And he also would, like, show up to a restaurant and say, I need a table for this many people, and then would bring in his black members of congregation without informing this white establishment that that's what he was doing. Like,
Okay,
he was doing,
yeah.
like, if he wasn't so crazy, like, he was doing cool stuff like that all the time, so it doesn't surprise me that they would then go and adopt these children.
Right.
Which is still great for the children. Until he goes crazy. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the church was growing, Jim moved them to Redwood Valley, California. Why do all the cults feel like they have to go to California?
No.
The growth wasn't the only reason for the move, though. Authorities started investigating healing rituals, so Jim decided the time was right to take his group to the West Coast.
That seems legitimate.
And yeah, that tracks. That makes total sense. More specifically, he chose the Redwood Valley because an article said it was the least likely target for a nuclear attack.
Oh. I can honestly say I have never researched how likely an area that I'm moving to is to be attacked.
No, I've looked up, like, crime and stuff, but not
that specifically.
Right. When he moved, 65 families in his congregation followed him.
That's quite a lot.
That really is, especially in such a small area.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a big move. It's not like he moved from Indiana to Illinois or Ohio, like across the country.
They followed him. It's so weird to me. Granted, then people went and followed him to Guyana.
During this time, African Americans were not paid fairly. They weren't treated fairly.
They weren't welcome everywhere.
They weren't. So I am just amazed that this many people were able, some of them, it was probably their entire life savings.
Right. It would have taken their entire life savings. It's crazy. The church got a lot of praise when they moved to California and spread from Redwood Valley to San Francisco. They were helping the elderly and mentally ill again, but they were also helping addicts and foster children.
So they had this good public perception, like, we're doing all this good.
And sad thing is, they were doing good, but all of the
Right.
bad is enough to... All the falsifying things, and they were problematic.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get into that. The church wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Things were beginning to change from a socialist environment to one that resembled a communist state. There was less religion being taught and more politics. This is where the church started to become more of a cult and less of a church. Top members in the church were forced to hand over all material possessions and money to Jim.
Oh, shocker.
I was waiting for whenever we were going to talk about that. Because, of course, he wanted all their money and possessions. In addition to their loyalty and devotion to him. Jim was also now to be referred to as Father, Dad, Christ, and later on, God.
Oh, boy.
Why do they always feel the need that they have to be called Jesus? They always want to be called Jesus.
They do. Get over yourself.
This is partially due to the fact that members began signing over custody of their children to him.
Oh, that's great.
This Christ was no pure soul, though. The truth is, Jim himself was addicted to drugs. He took large amounts of amphetamines and barbiturates. Of course, with these drugs being used in this manner, he began to have mood swings, poor health, and the big one, paranoia. Jim was convinced that the CIA, FBI, and every other government agency were after him. This paranoia was the reasoning for the church moving to Guyana, South America. The worst truth is that the members of the cult were treated horribly. Before we talk about the move to South America, let's talk about the treatment of the members. Members were brainwashed by Jim to believe he was an actual god. He is quoted as saying, if you see me as your savior, I will be your savior. If you see me as your God, then I'll be your God. Not only were they brainwashed to believe this, but Also, but that he was actually healing them from chronic ailments such as cancer and heart disease, and that he could read their minds and predict their futures. He couldn't actually do any of this. I remember reading one of the many books I've read about Jonestown, and whenever he was curing cancer, like, he would put his people, like his really close, like people closest to him, speckle him throughout the crowd with like disguises and stuff, and they would stand up and talk about they have this horrible stomach cancer, and would Jim heal them? And especially whenever he was not speaking at his church, but at other churches to recruit more members, they would do this. And Jim would heal their cancer. They'd run to the bathroom and then puke out the cancer, but really they came back in holding chicken livers to show everyone that the cancer was gone.
So he was convincing.
Yeah. And he was wild. Like,
what a scammer.
But also, how much devotion do you have to for somebody to fake cancer so hard that you will go and pretend to puke up chicken livers?
Yeah, and imagine being someone in the crowd watching that. That is so not fair to those people either. I mean, it's almost like you're preying on them.
Absolutely. That's exactly what is happening. And it wasn't just with cancer that he would do that with. Right. It was mobility issues. All of a sudden, somebody could stand up from a wheelchair and walk. It was all of his people on the inside. It's sad.
It is.
And you almost have to wonder what he had on them also.
Right.
To keep that loyalty going. Because eventually that would have caught up to you.
Yes.
Jim would also have those members dig through trash to find the information they needed to convince prospects or newer members that he was legitimate. So they would go through the trash, find medical information, what kind of medications people were taking, and then show that Jim can heal that.
Yeah.
Crazy. Then there were the allegations of physical and sexual abuse. Jim would use sex to both control and humiliate his followers.
Great.
Now, don't get it twisted. This wasn't like your sex cult that we've talked about in the past, but it was used as a tool for him. One former member named David Parker Wise, who was also a pastor in their Los Angeles church, wrote, "But when Jim felt threatened by someone, he developed a need to compromise them sexually or humiliate them in public or both. I believe the public humiliation was reserved for those he could not compromise sexually. Many former members have memories of bad experiences, and, not surprisingly, given Jim's approach to and use, many of these bad experiences are directed or indirectly connected with sex. The hesitation to speak on the subject has lingered over all these years." So Jim's approach was to publicly humiliate, beat, and sexualize his members to have control over them. To this day, many members cannot speak out about the abuse.
That's horrible.
Yeah, allegedly, Jim would sleep with people's wives to humiliate them, the wife and the husband, if they were thought to be leaving the church. And then publicly say, so-and-so's been unfaithful, let's shame them. And
right.
It was like that scene from Game of Thrones when they're making those women walk naked through the streets.
Right. She was unfaithful with me.
Exactly. While we're on topic of things that happen in the cult, let's talk about their beliefs. They essentially had two main thoughts. The first is the belief in the power of socialism. Essentially, it represented humanism and the power of human beings to recreate and reshape reality to benefit everyone. The second belief is that of the prophetic call to social justice. This belief had members believing that they could create the kingdom of God by living in an evangelical community. They believed that Jim was moving the group to South America to accomplish this goal.
Okay, so I totally see how I could have fallen for that. My personality would be all in there. Not so much the kingdom of God part, but more of like the socialism, like humans can create a better world. We can create a better world for everyone. I align with that.
I feel like you could have been pulled in by Jim if he wasn't so heavily religious based. But I think that Jim chose people to manipulate, but he really could have, he didn't have to go the religious route. I think Jim could have went anywhere.
Oh, yeah. He could have just had, like, a regular socialist cult, like,
yeah,
you know.
Or started out like Nexium with the, you know.
The self-help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the cult moved to Guyana, over 900 people moved with him, which is crazy to me.
That's a lot of people.
Especially when the majority of them had already given over their life savings.
Right.
The settlement got its name because of Jim, who named it after himself. Jonestown.
Shocker. Feed into his narcissism.
Absolutely. Jonestown was located in a jungle and isolated members from the outside world. You're in a cult.
Yeah. If you didn't know by now.
You are in a cult. The community was proposed as a utopia where members would create the perfect world. In fact, he sold the community as an agricultural commune that was rich with food, had no mosquitoes or snakes. They're moving to South America in the jungle.
In the jungle.
And was a perfect 72 degrees year-round.
I feel like it gets a lot hotter than that in
You're
South
moving
America.
to South America in the jungle. This, of course, was a lie that Jim used to get people to follow him there. This is when Jim started to drug his members. He would use Quaaludes, Demerol, Valium, morphine, and Thorazine to control them and ensure their obedience. I'm not going to lie, the agricultural commune probably would have been enough to get me there.
Yeah.
That's my thing. Everybody feeding everyone. Speaking of which, I have another cucumber I need to go pick. Members were forced to work long hours doing manual labor to build the town. Most members were working 6 days a week with 12-hour days.
Oh, God, out in that heat doing manual labor.
It's just 72 degrees year-round.
Yeah, okay.
Naturally, their living conditions were poor, unsanitary. The day-to-day regular at Jonestown including horrific beatings of members, more fake healings, violent outbursts from Jim, hour-long, overnight seminars at the Great Pavilion. And he also conducted rehearsals.
That is insane. So he had this plan all along. This was how they were going to go out if the time came.
Right, like
if you're making your members rehearse.
Any, sleep deprivation. He controls the food. He's drugging them. There was also no food able to be grown in Jonestown because the soil was too thin. Nothing would grow. Which I would be severely upset if I moved there for an agricultural utopia and I didn't grow anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I get mad whenever deer eat my garden. I couldn't imagine if nothing actually grew. Top members would be sent to beg for food or to gather rotting food from markets.
That's disgusting.
And riddled with illness, I'm sure. Members were not allowed to talk in the commune. Jim knew people were unhappy, and unhappy people complain and make others unhappy. So he instituted a rule that no one could talk when Jim's voice was played over the PA system. This also prevented members from plotting how to leave. Jim told his followers that he planted people to weed out those who complain. Jim said that if someone complains to you, you must denounce them. This caused a lack of trust between members and gave Jim more control.
Oh, yeah, because I'm sure that PA system played 24/7.
Non-stop. Unless, they were sounding the alarm to get everyone to the pavilion to listen to the hours and hours long seminars. I would go crazy.
Yeah.
Services at Jonestown were hostile, to say the least. Jim would preach about the government and politics, but not a lot about religion. In fact, he would stomp on Bibles. Services were surrounded by armed guards, creating a sense of fear in the members.
I'm sorry, but any form of religion that you're surrounded by armed guards?
There's a problem with that. Families of Jonestown residents heard about the conditions that their family members were living in and went to their government officials, as they should.
Right.
California Representative Leo Ryan actually took a trip to Jonestown on November 14, 1978. But this only fueled Jim's paranoia. See, Jim stockpiled weapons for the community. Those weapons were used to attack the representative and the 4 people who accompanied him. All 5 were murdered by the followers as they boarded their plane to leave on November 18th, 1978. The representative was shot 45 times.
That's excessive.
That is absolutely excessive. I get a double tap.
Right.
But 45 times? After this attack, Jim was over the line of sanity. I mean, he was a little insane to begin with.
Right, but this was
over the edge. Jim told his followers that they would be attacked because of the murders that occurred the same day. Jim began preparing his followers for mass suicide. He told them, when they start parachuting out of the air, they'll shoot some of our innocent babies. In order to have his followers motivated to save themselves.
Quote unquote, save themselves.
Jim instructed some of his members to concoct a mixture of grape Kool-Aid and cyanide.
I want to mention that I laughed right there, not because this was funny. Because I think Jim's an idiot.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. That is literally where that phrase comes from. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. First, he ordered all the mothers and fathers to give the drink to their children.
That is horrible. Horrifying.
And after the children drank the Kool-Aid, the parents and remaining adults drank it as well. If a member refused to drink the poison, they were forced by the threat of being shot or through injection. This entire act was filmed in what is called the death tape. Those who were outside the compound were ordered to kill themselves by whatever means necessary. Jim communicated this message via radio, which broadcast all over Guyana. At the end of the suicide, Jim took his own life via a weapon to the head. Which, I'm sorry, if you're going to force people to drink this, but you can't drink it.
Right.
That is sad. There's also conspiracies that Jim wasn't actually the one to pew-pew himself.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because only less than 100 people survived, I think. So It could have been one of them.
That's just conspiracy, though. I can also see Jim not doing it.
Yeah.
His wife and several of his children, as well as over 900 cult members, died in Jonestown that day. Some of the younger members, like a couple of his sons, they were like playing basketball tournament, like in town, and they were at one of the safe houses in town. And the quote unquote mother of that house was trying to orchestrate and get everyone there to unalive themselves.
Right.
And she took care of herself and children, but a few did survive there as well.
I think his oldest son is definitely still, like, his biological son is alive.
I think Stephen was also the one that was, like, there at that house. Okay. The Jonestown Massacre is one that's still talked about today. Just this year, a new documentary was released on Hulu, in addition to several others previously released on different platforms. There are books, journals, college studies, and other forms of media that discuss what happened and how it happened. And also, there's also a lot of cult-based movies that follow exactly what this is. There's one called The Sacrifice, I think.
I think so.
That is, it's a phenomenal movie, but it's...
Where the group goes to the village, her brother lives there.
Yeah. No, I think she lives there, the brother goes to find her.
Oh, okay, yes.
But regardless, it's really good. If I can figure out what movie that is, I'll put up the title. It's actually really good, but it's essentially Jonestown. Mm-hmm. Down to the Kool-Aid. Essentially, a narcissistic, paranoid, charismatic man controlled people via manipulation, charm, and drugs. Jim Jones and Jonestown will forever remind us all not to drink the Kool-Aid.
Dun.
This has always been such a fascinating topic for me because I could never understand following someone that hard, especially his inner circle that knew he faked the healings.
Right.
that knew that he was having sex with other people, that knew that he was on drugs. Like, I don't understand blindly following somebody like that.
I don't either, especially out of the country. This was the case with Children of God. Is that who it was?
Maybe.
That moved all over
Yeah.
Asia. Okay. This is what happened like with the Children of God. People would go where all over these countries. I don't understand following someone to South America.
Especially when you've already given them all your money.
Right. And some of them probably are ones that moved to California with him.
Like, that is crazy. Like, I get following your loved ones, your family. But even at that, if one of my family members moves clear to California...
You couldn't live without me. You'd be coming too.
I'm aware. She's already plotting her leave. She's going on vacation for a week and I can't do it. But it's just wild. Like, I get having devotion for someone. I do not understand that.
I almost feel like he chose the group of people that he chose to target for his followers because at the time he was the only one who was allowing integrated churches. He was promoting integration.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that had a big draw on a population that was...
Very marginalized.
Yes. And I think that was intentional.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying he didn't care about African Americans at all. I'm saying that I think everything he did was intentional to grow members of that population.
Yeah,
because he could get that population to follow him.
And if it didn't start that way, it definitely turned into that. Like, maybe he did at some point have good intentions, but they were very misguided.
Yeah, it almost feels like the African American community was kind of targeted by... they were targeted by him. That was who he chose to go after. But it was almost like they were preyed on by him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is one of the more unfortunate things I think about when I think about this group.
Especially because at that time, he's like, let's go to South America. It's going to be better there. And they're like, can't get worse than here.
Right.
It's wild. What do you guys think? Most people have heard about Jonestown. Did you learn anything new? Let us know down below. If you've made it this far in the podcast and you're watching over on YouTube, make sure you leave
a monkey emoji.
Leave a monkey emoji in the comment section to let us know you listen to all of us. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We put out new episodes every week. If you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify or any other major podcasting platforms, give us a rate and review on there and help us get this message out to more people.
Make sure you follow us over on TikTok and Instagram. We're very active over there.
And on that note, stay spooky, friends.